The knife glinted under the flickering streetlight, and Ji-won Park knew she had seconds to live. She'd taken the wrong shortcut through Itaewon's back streets, a mistake born of exhaustion after a 14-hour day at the gallery. Now 3 men surrounded her, their faces obscured by shadows and cigarette smoke. The leader's blade traced lazy circles in the air between them, almost playful. "Pretty thing," he murmured in Korean, his breath reeking of soju. "Wrong place, very wrong time." Ji-won's back pressed against the cold brick wall, her phone smashed on the ground 3 feet away. She thought of her father, 10 years gone, murdered in another alley just like this one. Would she die the same way, alone, unmissed until morning? The blade moved closer. Then a gunshot cracked through the night. The leader crumpled, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. His companions spun toward the source, a man in an immaculate black suit emerging from a Mercedes, gun raised with professional calm. 2 more shots, 2 more bodies. Ji-won couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The stranger approached, his face sharp and beautiful in the dim light, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow like a signature. "You're safe now," he said, his voice like smoke and velvet. But as Kang Min-jae extended his hand to her, Ji-won had no idea she was reaching toward the man who'd destroyed her entire world. "Like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from, and what time it is right now. We love seeing our global family tuning in. What would you have done if this happened to you? Tell us in the comments." 3 days earlier, Ji-won's life had been beautifully ordinary. She'd spent the morning at Gaon Gallery in Gangnam, preparing for an exhibition of contemporary Korean artists. At 28, she'd built a quiet reputation in Seoul's art world. The thoughtful curator with an eye for emerging talent and a gentle smile that put nervous artists at ease. Her apartment in Seongsu-dong was small but carefully curated. White walls adorned with her father's favorite paintings, minimalist furniture, and a shelf dedicated to his memory. Park Hyun-woo had been an accountant, a gentle man who taught her to see beauty in numbers and patterns. His murder 10 years ago had been ruled a case of mistaken identity. Wrong place, wrong time, caught in gang crossfire. The case went cold. No arrests, no justice. Ji-won had learned to live with the hollow ache, channeling her grief into her work. Her best friend Min Seo often worried about her. "You need to live, Ji-won, not just exist," she'd said over coffee that Tuesday. "When's the last time you went on a date?" Ji-won had laughed it off, but Min Seo wasn't wrong. She'd built walls around herself, never letting anyone too close. How could she, when the world had proven so brutal? Meanwhile, across the city, Kang Min-jae sat in his penthouse overlooking the Han River, reviewing reports from his lieutenants. At 35, he controlled half of Seoul's underground. Smuggling, protection, information. His empire was built on blood, and he wore his sins like the expensive suits that draped his frame. But lately, the weight had become unbearable, especially when he thought about the innocent man they'd killed a decade ago. Collateral damage in a war Min-jae now regretted starting. He didn't know that man's daughter was about to walk into his life. Ji-won woke in an unfamiliar room, silk sheets beneath her fingers, the scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. Panic shot through her chest until memory returned. The alley, the gunshots, the stranger's hand pulling her into his car. She'd fainted from shock, her body finally surrendering to the terror her mind had been fighting. The bedroom was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing Seoul's glittering skyline at dawn. Minimalist luxury, black marble, chrome fixtures, abstract art that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Where was she? The door opened, and he entered. The man from the alley, now wearing a simple white shirt and dark slacks, his hair slightly disheveled. In daylight, he was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, and intense eyes that seemed to catalog everything. That distinctive scar giving him an edge of danger. "You're awake," Min-jae said, his voice softer than she'd expected. "How do you feel?" "Where am I?" Ji-won sat up, pulling the blanket to her chest. "Who are you?" "Someone who happened to be in the right place." He set down a tray, tea, rice porridge, perfectly arranged. "You're safe here. Those men won't bother you again. Because you killed them." The words came out flat, factual. His eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Yes." Ji-won should have been terrified, should have demanded to leave, called the police, run. But something in his controlled demeanor, the careful way he kept his distance, the genuine concern in his voice, it disarmed her. I'm Min-jae, he offered. And you are? Ji-won. Park Ji-won. The name clearly meant nothing to him. He had no idea he just saved the daughter of the man whose blood still stained his conscience. Let me take you home, Ji-won, Min-jae said. But first eat. You're still shaking. Against every instinct screaming danger, Ji-won found herself nodding. Min-jae didn't just take her home, he became her shadow. Over the next 2 weeks, Ji-won noticed him everywhere. At the cafe near her gallery, in the parking garage of her apartment building. Once she caught a glimpse of his Mercedes idling across the street as she locked up for the night. When she finally confronted him outside Gammon Gallery, he didn't deny it. The men who attacked you belong to the Jade Serpents, Min-jae explained, his hands in his pockets, looking almost apologetic. I eliminated their immediate threat, but the organization doesn't forget. Until I'm certain you're safe, I'm staying close. I didn't ask for a bodyguard. No, you asked to live. His eyes held hers. I'm making sure you can. Something shifted between them in that moment. An invisible thread pulling taut. Ji-won knew she should be afraid, should demand he leave her alone. But the truth was, she'd never felt safer than when she knew he was watching. Their relationship evolved in stolen moments. Coffee conversations where Min-jae revealed nothing about his work, but everything about his taste in art. Late-night phone calls when Ji-won couldn't sleep, her father's ghost haunting her dreams, and Min-jae's voice became an anchor. The way he looked at her, like she was something precious and breakable, made her feel alive for the first time in years. Min Seo warned her. There's something dangerous about him, Ji-won. The way he moves, the way people look at him. He's not just some businessman. But Ji-won was already falling, tumbling into an intimacy that felt inevitable. One rainy evening, Min-jae appeared at her apartment with takeout and a rare smile. They ate on her living room floor, surrounded by her father's paintings, and when Min-jae's hand brushed hers, neither of them pulled away. Tell me about him, Min-jae said softly, nodding toward the photos on her shelf. My father. He was murdered 10 years ago. Ji-won's voice caught. Gang violence, wrong place, wrong time. Min-jae's face went perfectly still, and for just a moment, Ji-won saw something like horror flash in his eyes before he buried it. I'm sorry, he whispered, and it sounded like a confession. The file landed on Ji-won's desk with a heavy thud. Min Seo stood over her, face pale, hands trembling. I hired a private investigator. I'm sorry, Ji-won, but I had to know who this man really is. Ji-won's heart hammered as she opened the folder. Photographs spilled out. Min-jae at underground clubs, surrounded by armed men. Min-jae shaking hands with known criminals. Surveillance shots with timestamps and locations. Financial records tracing money through shell corporations. Kang Min-jae, age 35, head of the Beko syndicate, suspected in over 40 murders, countless extortions, arms deals spanning 3 countries. A mafia boss. Ji-won's hands went numb. The man she'd been falling for, the man who'd made her feel safe, was a monster. But then Min Seo turned to the last page, and Ji-won's entire world shattered. Case file. Nucker 2015-0347, Park Hyun-woo murder. Primary suspect, Kang Min-jae motive, territorial dispute with Iron Tiger Gang. Status insufficient evidence for prosecution. No. The word came out as a whisper. No, no, no. The investigator's notes were clinical, brutal. Park Hyun-woo, accountant, killed by Beko enforcers on orders from Kang Min-jae during a targeted hit on Iron Tiger financial operations. Civilian casualty. Body found in Yongsan Alley, 3 gunshot wounds. Ji-won couldn't breathe. The room spun violently as 10 years of grief crystallized into a single, horrifying truth. The man she'd been falling in love with had ordered her father's execution. Every gentle touch, every protective gesture, every moment of intimacy, all of it built on a foundation of her father's blood. That night when Min-jae called, Ji-won answered with a voice like ice. Park Hyun-woo. Do you remember that name? The silence on the other end stretched for an eternity. Ji-won, his voice cracked, heavy with sudden understanding and dread. My father, you killed my father. She was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. Tell me it's not true, please, Minjae. Tell me it's a lie. Another silence. Then barely audible, I can't. Ji-won ended the call and collapsed, her screams swallowed by the empty apartment. Did you see that twist coming? Comment yes or no below. For 3 days, Ji-won didn't leave her apartment. She sat on the floor surrounded by her father's photographs, trying to reconcile two impossible truths. Min-jae had murdered her father, and she had fallen in love with him. Both facts existed simultaneously, tearing her apart from the inside. The calls came constantly, dozens of them. She let them all go to voicemail, but she couldn't stop herself from listening. Ji-won, please, let me explain. Delete. I know I have no right, but please just listen. Delete. I've lived with this guilt every day for 10 years. Your father's face haunts me. I didn't know who you were, but God help me, even if I had known. Delete. On the fourth day, Min Seo found her. The apartment was dark, curtains drawn, Ji-won still in the same clothes from 3 days ago. You need to eat, Min Seo said gently, sitting beside her friend. How? Ji-won's voice was raw, broken. How do I reconcile this? I loved him, Min Seo. I love him. Even knowing what he did. Even hating him. I still feel it. What does that make me? Human. But Ji-won felt anything but human. She felt fractured. A broken thing with jagged edges that cut anyone who came close, including herself. That night she finally went to her father's grave. Rain poured down as she knelt before the headstone, mud soaking through her clothes. I failed you, Appa, she whispered. I fell in love with your killer. I let him touch me, hold me. I felt safe with the man who took you away from me. The rain mixed with her tears until she couldn't tell them apart. In his penthouse across the city, Min-jae sat alone in the dark, a loaded gun on the table before him. He'd built an empire on violence, survived countless assassination attempts, stared down death 100 times without flinching. But losing Ji-won, losing the one pure thing he'd ever touched, was breaking him in ways bullets never could. He deserved this pain, deserved worse. Maybe, he thought, picking up the gun, this was the only redemption left. Ji-won found the letter slipped under her door on the 7th day. Not from Min-jae, from someone named Choi Sang-wook, claiming to be a former member of the Beko Syndicate. The address led to a small restaurant in Mapogu, the kind of place where old men played Go and asked no questions. She went armed with pepper spray and Min Seo on speed dial, but the elderly man waiting in the corner booth looked more like someone's grandfather than a gangster. Thank you for coming, Miss Park, Sang-wook said, gesturing to the seat across from him. I know what you discovered. I was there the night your father died. Ji-won's breath caught, but she forced herself to listen. The Iron Tigers were using your father's accounting firm to launder money. He didn't know. When Min-jae ordered the hit on their financial network, your father was working late, in the wrong office at the wrong time. Sang-wook's weathered hands trembled around his teacup. Min-jae was 25, newly in power, trying to prove himself ruthless enough to lead. When he learned an innocent man died, something in him broke. That doesn't excuse— No, it doesn't. Sang-wook met her eyes. But after that night, everything changed. Min-jae created strict protocols. No civilian casualties ever. He funded orphanages, paid for education, built legitimate businesses. Dozens of men left the life because he gave them options. He's still a criminal, Miss Park, but he's been trying to atone. Sang-wook slid a thick envelope across the table. Your father's case file, the real one. Min-jae's been investigating for 10 years. Trying to prove the Iron Tigers deliberately put your father in harm's way. He found evidence, Miss Park, enough to bring them down. Why are you telling me this? Because Min-jae won't. He believes he deserves your hatred. Sang-wook stood to leave. Maybe he does, but you deserve the whole truth before you decide. Alone, Ji-won opened the envelope. Page after page of investigation reports, witness statements, financial trails. Min-jae had spent a decade and a fortune pursuing justice for a man he'd accidentally killed. At the bottom, a handwritten note in Min-jae's precise script. I cannot undo what I've done, but I can ensure it never happens again. This is not redemption. This is penance. MJ. Ji-won's hands shook as pieces clicked into place, the way Min-jae had protected her without question. His horror when she mentioned her father, the guilt that lived behind his eyes. He was a killer, a criminal, the man who destroyed her world. But he was also the only person in 10 years who'd actually fought for her father's memory. She thought of her father's favorite saying, Ji-won-ah, people are not single stories. We contain multitudes. For the first time in days, Ji-won knew what she had to do. Ji-won found Min-jae in the last place she expected, her father's grave. He knelt in the rain, head bowed, a bottle of soju and white chrysanthemums laid before the headstone. He looked hollowed out, thinner than she remembered, his expensive suit soaked through. He didn't notice her approach until she stood directly beside him. Ji-won. He started to rise, but she held up her hand. Stay. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered. I read everything. Sang-wook gave me the files. Min-jae's face contorted with something between hope and agony. I never wanted you to carry this burden. Any of it. Too late. Ji-won knelt beside him, rain plastering her hair to her face. You killed my father. That's a fact I'll carry forever. But the Iron Tigers set him up, used him as a shield, and you spent 10 years trying to make it right. That's also true. It doesn't absolve me. No, it doesn't. Ji-won turned to face him fully, and Min-jae nearly broke at the raw pain in her eyes. But here's what I realized. I can hate what you did and still see who you become. I can grieve my father and acknowledge that you've honored his memory better than anyone. I can love you and despise you in the same breath. You shouldn't love me, Min-jae whispered, his voice shattered. I'm poison, Ji-won. Everything I touch. Then let me choose my own poison. She grabbed his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm not asking you to be innocent. I'm asking if you're willing to be better. The Iron Tigers are still out there. Sang-wook said you have evidence. So finish it. Not for redemption. You're right, you'll never have that. But for my father. For all the others who might get caught in the crossfire. Min-jae stared at her like she was both his salvation and his damnation. If I do this, if I bring them down, there will be war. The entire underworld will target me. Anyone close to me. I'm already a target, Ji-won said. I have been since the night you saved me. Since before that, probably. The moment my father died. So stop trying to protect me by pushing me away. If you want to atone, then let me help you finish this. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you stand beside me after everything? Ji-won's answer was simple, terrible, true. Because my father taught me that revenge is empty, but justice matters. Because you're the only person who loved him enough to spend 10 years hunting his real killers. And because, her voice cracked, because I looked into your eyes and saw someone drowning in the same grief I've carried alone. The rain poured down as Min-jae pulled her close, his forehead pressed to hers, both of them trembling. I don't deserve you, he breathed. I know, Ji-won whispered back, but let's burn down the people who destroyed our lives anyway. Above them, thunder rolled across Seoul's skyline like a declaration of war. 6 months later, the Iron Tigers were destroyed. Min-jae's evidence, meticulously gathered over a decade, had been delivered simultaneously to prosecutors, journalists, and rival syndicates. The leadership fell within weeks. Arrests, assassinations, empire crumbling from within. The man who deliberately positioned Park Hyun-woo as a human shield died in prison before trial, shanked by someone with old grudges. Justice, messy and imperfect, but justice nonetheless. Min-jae paid his own price. He surrendered himself to authorities, providing testimony that dismantled half of Seoul's criminal networks, including portions of his own organization. His sentence, 15 years, eligible for parole in 8 with good behavior and continued cooperation. The day of his sentencing, Ji-won sat in the courtroom gallery, her hand resting over her heart. Now, she visited him every week at Seoul Detention Center. They talked through reinforced glass, phone receivers pressed to their ears, finding intimacy in stolen words and shared silence. I sold the penthouse, Min-jae told her during one visit. his prison uniform stark against his still sharp features. The money's going to victim compensation funds, including your father's case. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. His eyes held hers with that familiar intensity. It won't bring him back, won't erase what I did, but it's something. Jiwon pressed her palm against the glass. Minjai mirrored the gesture, their hands separated by barriers they'd both chosen. I'm curating a new exhibition, she said softly. Stories of redemption and moral complexity. It opens next month. Will you tell our story? Not yet, maybe never. She smiled sadly. Some stories are too raw, too real. But I'll paint it, I think. Something abstract, light and shadow existing together, neither consuming the other. Coexistence, Minjai murmured. Not forgiveness. Maybe that's all we get, Ji-won replied. Maybe that's enough. On the anniversary of her father's death, Ji-won returned to his grave with fresh flowers. Minjai had arranged, somehow, even from prison, for a new headstone. Simple, elegant, with an inscription that made her weep. Park Hyun-woo, beloved father. Your daughter remembers. Your death has meaning. Your life mattered. Below, in smaller text, justice delayed is not justice denied. Ji-won knelt, touching the cold marble. I found a way forward, Appa, she whispered. Not forgetting, never forgetting, but living, finally living. The wind carried cherry blossoms across the cemetery, soft and pink against the gray stones. Ji-won stood, shoulders back, her father's memory and Minjai's guilt both carried in her heart like twin weights she'd learned to balance. Some loves were born in darkness. Some redemption came without absolution. Some wounds never fully healed. But Ji-won Park had learned the hardest truth of all. You could hold contradictions within yourself and still move forward. You could love and grieve, forgive and remember. Find peace without pretending the past never happened. She walked toward the cemetery gates, the future uncertain, but finally, blessedly, hers to write. Behind her, the sun broke through Seoul's perpetual clouds, casting light and shadow in equal measure across the graves. If this story touched you, like and subscribe and tell us where you're watching from.